Well, today we're going to wrap up a series that we started a few weeks ago, and it's actually called The Art of Being Unordinary. Unordinary. And think about it. Who would ever want their legacy to be they were just an ordinary person? I think all of us would like to be unordinary in the very best possible way. And so we've been living out of Hebrews chapter 11, and this is called like the Hall of Heroes in Faith. And there's all these really special people, and we've talked about some of them. And Abraham, I think we talked about him last week. We talked about Noah and Moses. And so today, we're going to talk about the most unlikely person that you would ever find in this particular chapter of the Heroes of Faith. His name is Samson. Some of you probably, you grew up, and if you were in Sunday school, they talked about Samson, this big, strong guy, and did all these amazing feats. And today, what we're going to talk about how to be a stronger person, because even though Samson was incredibly strong physically, he was a hot mess, as we're going to discover as we start talking about his life. And I think one of the things that we all admire, at least I do anyway, I'm sure you do, is people that are strong. Not just strong physically, but they're the kind of people that when, there's like problems and pressure and everything, and they just seem to be able to hold up. They seem to be able to just walk through it, and they're not falling apart. And you're like, wow, like how do you do that? You're just a strong person. And so we're gonna discover this morning about how you and I can be a strong person. Again, you can be physically strong. You can be strong in other ways, intellectually strong, and yet your life is just falling apart. It's been said that people that have great strengths also have great weaknesses. And that's been my experiences as I've looked at people and they're just amazing. They have this incredible thing going on. I read, I think it was a few years ago, I read the autobiography of Arnold Schwarzenegger. I've always been kind of fascinated by his life. And I was really taken by how much discipline he had in his life. I mean, he would get up like early in the morning. He had his routine of lifting weights. His goal was to, after he moved here from Austria, was to be Mr. Universe, and he finally attained that goal. I think he did it several times. And then he wanted to get into acting, and just the incredible discipline that this guy had in his life. That was the upside. The downside was that when he talked about this a lot in his book, he was not disciplined in the area of his sex life. And he was a big playboy before he got married. And unfortunately, that played into his marriage. And ultimately, he had an affair with a maid. They had a kid, destroyed his marriage. And if you ever see him in interviews today, it's like one of the worst moments of his life that just got away from him. He had great strengths in a lot of different ways, but he had great weaknesses. And so I guess my question to us today is can this be avoided? Can we learn from some person, like a person like Samson? Because they say, it's always wise to learn from our own mistakes, but it's wiser to learn from somebody else's mistakes. Like, you watch somebody and they really blow it, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to do that too. No, we don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. Some of you know this because you grew up, let's just say, with parents and they were alcoholics, or maybe your parents they had horrible temper, they just were toxic because of their temper and they were bitter, or maybe their spending habits were so horrible and you were a victim of that because your household was always broke. And so there was something inside of you as you were growing up, you watched that and you said, note to self, I'm not going to be that person. I'm not going to make that mistake. And so as we look at Samson, we're going to see some major mistakes. Samson, he really could have gone down as one of the all-time great leaders. But because of his messy life, it didn't go down that way. So let me just bring us back to what we're going to talk about today. So he's in the book of Judges. He's actually in chapters 13 through 16. And he actually led Israel for 20 years. Now, in the time of the Judges, it was kind of an interesting time. This is the time before the king, if you're in the Old Testament, time before the king. And so Israel was really a mess, and they would go out and they'd get into idolatry, and God would punish them. And he'd always punish them by bringing their enemies to subdue them. In this particular time in their history, the Philistines came in, and they were just really hard on Israel. And so God raised up Samson, and Samson's job description, it says judge. Don't think like the robe, court. These judges they dealt with a lot of tribal kind of things. They were leaders. A lot of times they were like military leaders. So Samson would be more of that kind of guy. So let's just jump right into chapter 13, verse 24. And it says, the woman gave birth to a boy, named him Samson. And he grew up, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him. So here's a real quick backstory on that. So his parents couldn't have children, which if you read through the Old Testament, even through the New Testament, you see that story over and over again. You see some parents, and they can't have children, and they're heartbroken. And then a couple of messengers from the Lord came to the parents and said, you're going to have a child. You're going to have a little boy. He's going to be great. He's going to be a leader of Israel. But we got some instructions for you. Your boy needs to take the Nazirite vow. Now, if you know anything about the Nazirite vow, you were never to cut your hair. You were never ever to touch alcohol. You were never ever to touch anything dead. It was part of the Levitical law. You were to eat kosher. In other words, you had to have a very special diet. So these were all the things that Samson would have to apply to his life. And again, God's plan for Samson, just like God has a plan for your life, was for him to successfully lead Israel. So everything's going okay until he is in his teenage years, probably 18, 19 years old. And you got to remember, he grew up in a godly home. He grew up with godly instruction. His path is looking good. And then he rebels, like as teenagers often do. And he just kind of goes, you know what? I'm just going to kind of do my own thing. And what does he do? He goes out and he finds a woman, and he's attracted to her, and she is not a Jew. Now, the Jews at that particular time were not to marry out of their faith, out of their ethnicity. They were to marry within, their tribes. And he doesn't do that. He just sees her, and she's what we call a Gentile, and he goes, I'm really attracted to her. And I want her. So in Samson's life, we're going to look at these three things that we want to avoid that sap his strength. And the first one, we're going to see this, is self-indulgence. Self-indulgence weakens your life. And when I say that, I'm talking about like lack of self-control. I'm talking about living an undisciplined life, that anything that's uncontrolled in our life will eventually come back and really, really hurt our life. Like let's make this as practical as possible. For instance, how you spend your money. Or it can be you're not controlling your sex life and you're just letting that get away from you. It can be food that can become your God. It can become alcohol. I'm just going to gamble a little bit, and the next thing you know, you're just out of control in that area. It can be your temper. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. It can be your temper. You just can't control your temper. Or it could be how you manage or don't manage your time, how you manage or don't manage your marriage. These are all areas that self-indulgence can play into and really, really drive your life down. It's no secret that Samson had a weakness for women. And you can imagine, he's incredibly strong. I'm sure all of the ladies looked at him and, ooh, Samson, you're so strong, you're so handsome. And he was very sensuous, and he was very impulsive. And so what we see in these chapters, 3 chapters, there's actually 4 chapters, but in 3 of these chapters, he's with a different woman every chapter, and it's always the wrong woman. It's never anybody that's a godly woman. It's always the wrong person. Any of you ever known somebody like that? And like, oh my gosh, they just keep getting with the wrong person. Maybe that was you. Hopefully you've learned. And so I don't know about you, but that's painful to watch. I've seen it, and people that I loved, that I cared for, I'm like, no, you did it again. And they just keep doing it over and over. And that's a whole different message in itself, probably. In Judges chapter 14, we find the first encounter. Let's get into the story a little bit. Samson went down to Timnah, and he saw there a young Philistine woman. Again, who was afflicting the Israelites at that particular time? Who were their enemies? The Philistines, right? And so he's going into enemy territory, and it says, when he returned, he said to his father and mother, I've seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. And his father and mother replied, isn't there an acceptable woman among you and among your relatives or among all the people? Must you go into the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife? But Samson said to his father, get her for me. she's the right one for me. I'm thinking they raised this kid special, and I'm thinking, like, I don't know. I would just like, what are you doing talking to me like that? But that's not what they did. They were like, he's an only kid, so whatever. But in the original Hebrew, it says, "Get her for me because she pleases me." In the Steve Bombachi translation, it's "Get her for me, she's hot." That's what he's looking for. He's attracted to her. And in this moment, Samson has total disregard for his faith. It's like everything, that special relationship, all the things that he did as he was growing up and really, trying to follow the ways of God, it's just out the back door. And, I find this is so unfortunate, but it's like I get a front row seat as I'm really trying to lead people towards Christ. And I'm not perfect by any means, believe me, but I just see people, they claim faith, and then on Sunday they got it, and then on Tuesday it's gone. And whenever, I want that more, and they just kind of abandon their faith, and it's hard to watch. Self-indulgence often starts like this, and it usually starts with rationalizing. And, if you break that word down, it simply means rational lies. And that's what we do. We tell ourselves rational lies. That's probably what Samson did here in this situation. And, it's kind of like, well, it'll just be this one time, and it's not that big of a deal, and it's not going to hurt anyone. And that's all the things that we tell ourselves. This is actually how affairs start. Affairs start, usually maybe there's a little trouble in the marriage, and somebody notices you, or you notice somebody, and there's that attraction thing. There's a little bit of a spark. And so, you kind of take that to the next level, and it turns into a little bit of flirting, and, nothing wrong with flirting. I'm still good, and you're lying to yourself because it's not good. And then you begin to fantasize about it. And then after you've been fantasizing for a while, it's like, well, we're just going to go have a drink together. It's not that big of a deal. And you have that drink, and the next thing you know, you are in the arms of that person into a full-blown affair. And that's how that happens. It started so innocently, it was like no big deal, and then it becomes that. And so what is the lesson of Samson's life? Well, the first lesson is that we learn that strong people discipline their desires. We all have desires. We all have different kinds of desires. We have to learn to discipline our desires because strong people see trouble and they steer clear of it. And they're honest with themselves. It says in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 12, it says this, I have the right to do anything. This is Apostle Paul speaking. I have the right to do anything, you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. The Apostle Paul is saying there's a lot of freedom in Christianity, but we also have to be wise. We have to say, is this beneficial for me, or is this going to hurt me? In Proverbs chapter 25, verse 28, it says, a person without self-control is like a city with broken down walls. City with broken down walls is in danger because the enemy is going to come on in. And that'll happen to our lives when we let our guard down. There's a second thing that we see in Samson's life in this next chapter. And this illustrates another big problem in his life. So we see that he was self-indulgent, but now we also see that he was bitter. And bitterness will weaken your life. When you look at Samson's life, and I encourage you to read it. It's a fascinating story. It's a tragic story in some ways. But you see that this guy is always angry. He's always out for revenge. He's bitter. It's always about resentment. And he's always upset. He's just kind of this hot mess all the time. And again, maybe you know somebody like that. Maybe a co-worker and you're like, oh, I know somebody just like that. Samson had this really, really violent temper. And it cost him a lot. It cost him a lot of grief in his life. And part of the problem was it seemed to be, as you read his story, it seemed to be his primary motivation. It's like, they got me, I'm going to get them. He always was out to get somebody. In Judges chapter 14, it says Samson burned with anger, and he went out and he killed 30 men. You know why he did it? Because he lost a bet. He lost a bet with these guys. It was kind of unfair. They sort of took advantage of him. So he says, all right. And so in order to pay his debt off, he killed 30 people and took their clothes and brought it back. And that's one of the first things that he does. That you can see that revenge thing in him. And then moving on, chapter 15, verse 3, Samson said, This time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. And then down to verse 7, Samson said, since you've acted like this, I won't stop until I get my revenge on you. He made the typical excuse that weak people make, which is basically, I merely did to them what they did to me. Man, if you and I live our life out that way, if we're always like, oh, you got me, I'm going to get you. You know, you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to tell you, life is not going to go well for you. And that's not the Christian principle. That's the opposite of the Sermon on the Mount. Complete opposite. I know it's hard. And so that was just kind of his modus operandi. It's always like, you get me, I'm going to get you. And so he's always angry all the time. Weak people are reactors. And so and I can relate to this because when I was a younger man, I hate to say this, I had a pretty hot temper. And my way of dealing with things was like, if you get me, I'm going to get you. And if you get me really bad, I'm going to get you really, really bad. And I can't tell you how much emotional energy I wasted just being angry, just being upset about things like that. Angry and bitter. It's such a waste of time. You know, think about this. I mean, this is the logical part of it. We're not very logical when we're angry, are we? But the logical part of it is whoever you're like angry at, whatever you're bitter about, you know, you're just burning inside, it's messing up your health, it's ruining your day. Probably the people around you are not enjoying who you're being at that particular time. In the meantime, the person that you're angry at, you know, they're eating filet mignon. You know, they're sleeping well at night. Oh, life is good. And what are you doing? You're not hurting them. You're just punishing yourself. It always hurts us, squanders our potential, affects our health, physical health, our emotional health. And a lot of times we can even kind of waste our genius. You know, God has put a little bit of genius in every one of us. He really has. And, you know, we have this creativity. And Samson could have been one of those guys. And he does something here in chapter 15, and it's kind of genius, and it's really creative. But it's all about revenge. So let's read it. Samson said to them, this time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them. So he went out and he caught 300 foxes and he tied their tail to tail in pairs. And then he fastened a torch to every pair of tails, lit the torches, and let the foxes loose in the standing grain of the Philistines. And he burned up the shocks and standing grain together with the vineyards and the olive groves. Now you have to admit, that's pretty creative. We could call them the original taillights. But look, is that how we really want to spend, like, our creativity? Is that, you know, like just sitting around thinking, how can I get them? In Proverbs chapter 29, verse 22, it says, an angry person starts a fight. A hot-tempered person commits all kinds of sins. Now, I know probably some of you are thinking, but Steve, isn't there a time for us to be angry? Aren't there some things that we should be angry about? And I would say absolutely, yes, there are. Like we should be angry at all the injustices, and you don't have to look very far to see injustice. We should be angry about sex trafficking. That's something that really ticks me off. We should be angry about, one of the things that kind of really gets me angry is just corrupt politicians. We should be angry about that because it affects everybody. We should be angry about a lot of things, but we have to be careful because once there's this line that we can cross, and when we cross it, it goes from being righteous anger into us just being upset, and then we begin to upset everybody around us. Yes, we can be angry for the right thing, and then translate that anger into do something positive, to make a difference, not just to walk around being angry. Have you ever prayed and said, Lord, please help me control my anger? God, please help me to overcome my bitterness. How do you think God would answer a prayer like that? Do you think that you'd pray that prayer and then you'd wake up in the morning and go, oh my goodness, I am no longer bitter. This is unbelievable. I prayed that prayer, last night. I woke up this morning. The anger's gone. I don't want to hurt that person anymore. I got to tell you, from my experience and watching a lot of other people, that's not how God works. Let me tell you an experience of my own life and how God worked in my life. And so in my first church, it was a very, very difficult time. I was there for almost 5 years. And after I'd been there for about 1 year, there was a leader that rose up in that church, and he fiercely opposed me. I mean, fiercely opposed me. And he began to try to ruin my reputation. He told all kinds of lies about me, slandered me. It just went on and on and on. You know, it'd be bad enough if this was like a couple of jabs, you know, a couple of one-time things. But this was over a period of 3 years. This guy just kept coming at me. And I didn't know what to do with that. And so the only thing I could do with that, and again, I'm the pastor, right? So I can't be the guy that comes up against him and, you know, punches him out, even though I wanted to punch him out a few times. But I can't be that guy. Like, I'm super angry. Like, what am I going to do about this? And so I just began to take it to God every single day. I don't know why, but it always showed up in the shower. I'd be taking a shower in the morning, and then all these thoughts about what I could do to this guy came into my mind. And then I thought, no, you can't be that guy. God, you got to help me. And over a period of time, God helped me to not be that way anymore. And as a matter of fact, here's what happened. This is the miracle. The miracle was God showed me this guy in a different way, give me a different lens to see this guy. And I began to realize how broken this guy was. And he was super broken. When you're angry at somebody who's hurting you, a lot of times you can't really see them. You can't see what's going on. But if you'll step back from it and you'll say, God, show me maybe something I haven't seen. Show me this person the way that I could see them or should see them. And I began to see him in a completely different way. I learned more about his life, and he'd been through a really hard life. And so I began to pray for this guy. And God actually gave me a heart for this guy after a while. Now, he never, ever came back to me and apologized. But my heart was good. I was able to say, oh, I'm okay. About 7 or 8 years ago, I was in Papua New Guinea, and we support a Bible translator over there. And the Bible translator said, I'd like you to give a message to the Inga tribe. This is a tribe of people. It's about 300,000 or 400,000 people. And they're just really, it's a revenge culture. And while I was there was 2 or 3 murders just while I was there. And so I thought, okay. And the Lord said, talk about what happened to you, knowing the kind of culture they are. And I remember, here's all these people. I have my Bible translator there. And I'm telling them this story. And I was looking into their eyes as they were just kind of leaning in, listening to my story about how God helped me to overcome my desire to get revenge. And they were so fascinated by it, and I know what they were thinking. They were like, well, why would you do that? We would just kill them. Because that was their culture. They live in a revenge culture. But for some of them, I got to believe that for some of them, maybe for the first time, they were thinking, maybe that's not the way to do it. These Christians, they kind of do things a little bit differently. Alexander the Great conquered the entire world by the time he was in his mid-30s. But man, he had a horrible, horrible anger problem. And one time, and it was a major flaw in his life, one time he ended up killing his top general, who also happened to be his best friend. And he did it by accident. He was just in a rage, and he ended up killing him. And he made this statement. He says, I've conquered the entire world, but I can't conquer my own soul. If there's bitterness inside of us and anger, we have to invite God into that and to help us. Proverbs chapter 29, verse 11 says, fools vent their anger, but the wise quietly hold it back. Bitterness will always weaken our life. Thirdly, and the last thing that we see in his life is carelessness weakens your life. You know, when you look at Samson's life, he was such a careless person. He was given this amazing gift, his strength. You know, the Bible says he had supernatural strength. There's never been anybody as strong as him, and his strength came from God, but he misused it. Have you ever met somebody that had an amazing gift, but they abused it and they misused it? This is that kind of a situation. And it doesn't hurt you to see somebody doing that, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, you know, you have this gift, and I wish I had that gift. It's incredible, but you're just blowing it. Remember, he took the Nazirite vow. He was supposed to live a certain kind of way. In fact, one time, there's one story, you can read about it in there, where he's on his way to see his girl, and on the way, a lion attacks him. And he just destroys this lion. He just, boom, just kills this lion. And then on his way back later on, there's a beehive that is in the carcass of the lion. And he reaches in and he gets a whole bunch of honey, which is strictly forbidden as a part of the Nazirite vow. And then he actually takes the honey and he brings it to his parents and doesn't tell them. So he causes them to also violate their own laws at that particular time. He was just careless. Have you ever met somebody and maybe even been envious of them because they live a careless life and it just seems like they always get away with it? And they're like, so, you're just like carefree and they do stuff and you're watching them. You go, if I did that, I'd get caught in a second. This person seems to be having all the fun and I'm not. You just keep watching their life. I've known people like that. At some point in time, it all just comes crashing down. Samson, he just thought everything was just a big game. He's just being this playboy. He didn't take God seriously. He didn't take himself seriously. In chapter 16, Samson's once again, another girl, right? And another Philistine girl. And he's attracted to this woman, but he doesn't know that this is going to be a fatal attraction. When the Philistines find out Samson has a thing for this woman, they're like, this is our opportunity. Her name is Delilah. And so they come to Delilah and they say to her, we're gonna make you an offer. And it was a lot of money. It was 11,000 shekels of silver, which would translate into roughly somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 in today's economy. So they offer all this money, and again, these were like poor people. So maybe she's in love with Samson, but when she sees that money, she's like, "I'll take the money, thank you." And so at this point, it's just like, how can I do this? How can I deliver Samson to the enemy, to these guys that are going to give me all this money? So in verse 6, chapter 16, verse 6, it says, so Delilah said to Samson, tell me the secret to your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued. Now this, if Samson was a smart man, which he wasn't, this should have been his first clue. Like, what about that? But he doesn't see it that way. He's just thinking all wrong. And, he's kind of under her spell. And he's like, I can imagine, he's like, oh, you want to tie me up? Ooh, this is kind of sexy. Where's this going to go, And so, verses 6 through 9. So Delilah said to Samson, please tell me what makes you so strong. I kind of wonder how she said this, Samson, please tell me what makes you so strong. And what would it take to tie you up securely? And Samson replied, well, if I were tied up with 7 new bowstrings that have never been tried, I would be as weak as anybody else. And so the Philistine rulers brought Delilah 7 new bowstrings, and she tied Samson up with them. And she had hidden some men in one of the inner rooms of her house, and she cried out, Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you. But Samson snapped the bowstrings as a piece of string snaps when it's burned by a fire. And so the secret of his strength was not discovered. Now, once again, you would think, because he sees the enemy, the Philistines, they're in the room, they're trying to subdue him, and then, of course, they can't. But at this point, she's actually trying to get me killed. But he doesn't, he's been playing this game for so long. It's like, how close can I get to the fire? And so he's kind of enjoying this thing. And so now he does it again. And he goes, well, if you put brand new ropes on me, and I'll be as weak as anybody else. And so she does it again, the Philistines are there, and she calls out for him. He busts the ropes like nothing. But then he gets a little careless. And this is just the way of sin. When you've been weak for a long time, when you just keep giving in to whatever weakness there is in your life, it's just going to turn into something like this, where you really, really start to lose your mind. And so he says, well, if you weave the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric on a loom, I would lose my strength. Do you see what's happening here? Now he's got his hair involved. Where does the strength come from? God said, don't ever cut your hair. So he's getting closer. Verses 15 through 17. Then Delilah pouted, how can you tell me I love you when you don't share your secrets with me? You've made fun of me these 3 times now, and you still haven't told me what makes you so strong. And she tormented him with her nagging day after day until he was sick to death of it. So Samson tells her everything, all about the Nazirite vow. And so then Delilah is like, she gets back in touch with the Philistine. She goes, bring the money. He told me everything. So Delilah lulls him to sleep once again, probably on his, he's on the couch or whatever on the lap, and goes to sleep. And she brings in the barber, and he's just cut all up, just took all of his hair off. Look what happens, verse 20. When he woke up, he thought, I will do as before and shake myself free. And this is the saddest verse in the entire story. But he didn't realize the Lord had left him. He didn't realize the Lord had left him. There's a real principle right there. You can play your little game with God as long as you think you can get away with it and be as careless as you can be. But there comes a point when God says, no, I'm not with you anymore. We're not doing this. I've tried. It doesn't mean that God has completely abandoned you, but he's not with you. He wasn't with him. And, in Hebrews chapter 12, it says that God disciplines those he loves. This is discipline right here. This is God saying, okay, all these years you've been wild and crazy, and I've tried to be there for you, but I'm not with you now. You're on your own. Look what happens. It says the Philistines took him and they gouged his eyes out. And they bound him with chains and they forced him to grind grain in a prison. So here he is, still very young, all the potential just gone, blind, grinding out grain, entertaining people. And really, the lesson here is that, nobody ever plans to fail, right? Nobody ever plans to be an alcoholic one day or to be a gambling addict or a sex addict. Nobody ever plans to just sink their own life. But it happens by degrees. It happens just by being careless. And so, it really begs the question, what are you committed to today? As the people of God, if you are a person of God, what are you committed to? Are you committed to Christ? Are you committed to the church? Are you committed to your family? Because your actual lifestyle reveals the truth about that question. Samson was committed to one thing, himself. He was a narcissist. He was selfish. He was committed to himself. He was immature, and he hurt so many people around him. Why? Because of this undisciplined lifestyle that he had. Now, some of you, by this point, you might be thinking, I hear what you're saying, Steve. Why is he in chapter 11 where the heroes are? Because he doesn't sound like a very good guy. And this is the beauty of the gospel right here. This is the beauty and the preciousness of God, that he is the God of second chances. Because while Samson is in there and he's grinding out the grain, blind, he begins to pray. He begins to get his relationship back with God. He actually begins to repent. And I'm sure there was he had a lot of time to repent. And I'm sure as he's grinding out the grain, he's repenting and repenting. He said, God, I am so sorry. At the same time, his hair is growing out. His hair is coming back. And the hair was actually the symbol of that commitment that he had to God. And so now he's truly repentant, and the hair is growing out. One day the Philistines had a great festival, and they said, hey, let's bring him out for entertainment. They were worshiping their god. Dagon was his name. And so this is what it says in Judges 16:25. It says, half drunk by now, the people demanded, bring out Samson so he can amuse us. And so he was brought out from the prison to amuse them, and they had him stand between the pillars supporting the roof. So just imagine, he's underneath, and up on the roof, it's a huge, huge area. And these are the main supporting pillars. And so what happens is that Samson asks this young servant, he goes, can you put me right, he kind of knew, he says, can you put me in this one central area where I could reach the pillars? And so he's right there, and he's be able to put his hands on these pillars. And he prays, he says, God, if you can help me this one more time for your glory, if you can help me to subdue my enemies. And no longer is it about him personally. Now he's got his heart right with God. And now he wants to actually fulfill the purposes that God created him for, which was to subdue the enemies of Israel. With one last effort, he pushes, and the whole thing comes tumbling down. 3,000 people perished, including Samson himself in that moment. And in a sense, God redeemed him. God redeemed that moment. He goes down in a blaze of glory. And so that's how he ends up being in this book of heroes. Worship team, you can come on up there right now. And so I'm going to finish with these last three questions, because this is a really interesting story, and I encourage you to go back and read it. But as I've said so many times, the stories are for us to learn things. There's principles in these stories. And so my first question to you would be this: what is out of control in your life right now? And you know it. And you're thinking, I'm losing ground. This one area of my life, it's getting away from me. What would that be in your life? God has brought you to this time, to this moment. He's speaking to you right now, whether somebody's listening to this on a podcast or they see it on YouTube later, or you're sitting here right now and you realize God has brought you here and there's something going on right now and he wants you to address. He loves you so much. He wants you to take care of it. What would that be in your life? And then what would be the next step? It's not just to feel bad about it. It's actually to do something about it. That's what it means to repent. It means we change our ways. We seek God. God, I'm sorry. And maybe it means getting help. Maybe it's something that's already bigger than you. And I just want to encourage you. We're here to help you. We'll pray for you, direct you. The next question is, who are you resentful against? Who are you bitter against? Is bitterness bringing you down? Is there somebody in your life, and every time you think about them, you just get angry to the point where it's really beginning to mess with you, to the point where it's hurting your relationships with other people? And God's speaking to you right now, and he says, you need to resolve that. You need to let that go. It doesn't mean you have to let that person back into your life necessarily, but you need to let that go, or it's going to hurt you. It's going to ruin your life. And then thirdly, what are you committed to? Another way of putting this is, are you taking God seriously? Or are you just kind of doing the cultural Christian thing? Christian on Sunday, somebody else on Wednesday. What is that for you? And maybe in this moment, you realize you need to recommit your life to Jesus. It's just totally gotten away from you. Would you bow your heads with me? Lord, I just believe that in this moment, you're speaking to people. In this moment, life is hard. A lot of temptation out there. A lot of distractions out there. The enemy's pressing in on us all the time, trying to take us down. But Lord, this is a wonderful opportunity this morning for somebody to recommit to you, or somebody to say, I see something in my life and it's going the wrong direction and I want to redirect right now. I want to get help right now. I want to change my ways right now. So I just invite you to open up your heart right now. Open up your life right now. Take that next step, whatever it is. Have courage. Just do it. Don't walk out of here today. Say, I'll do it later, because you probably won't. Do it now. Come to Jesus now. He loves you so much. He wants the very best for your life. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.